Namah Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine Namah. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunnavadi Paschatya Desatarine Nam. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Pravijacharya Astor Shishimat His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Pravijacharya Astor Shishimat His Divine Grace Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Anantikoti Vaishnav Vrind Ki Naam Acharya Silaridas Thakur Ki Prem se kaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrind Ki Sisi Radha Krishna Gova Gopinath Shyam Kun Radhikun Giri Govardhan Ki Vrindavan Navadvip Dham Ki Gangamai Jamanamai Ki Bhakti Devi Tulasi Devi Ki Samaveta Bhakta Vrind Ki Itai Gaur Premanande. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Hare Krishna. So today we're reading from chapter 11, Harisuri Prabhu's diary, and we start with Sri Vrindavan Dham, March 31st, 1976. So I'll paraphrase as much as possible and read a little from the diary, and we could have some discussion also on the topic. If you feel that you want to raise a point, then please do so whilst I'm speaking, because it's difficult. In the end, we don't have the time. So Srila Prabhupada arrived in Vrindavan, and when he arrives, generally there's always a group of devotees who are enthusiastic to receive him, and most of them have traveled from Mayapur to Sri Vrindavan Dham, and they were happy to connect with Prabhupada again. And we just came in time, Prabhupada just came in time to greet the deities, and he gave a short class on the 9 processes of devotional service. But lots of devotees also returned to their home temples, but still there was a large crowd back to capacity. So Sri Vrindavan Dham is Prabhupada's real home, and he'd been a long time away. After 3 months he had come back. So travel was hectic, and he was taking time now to recuperate, to get back, to get well again, because also traveling is very tiring. So April 1st, 1976, so Prabhupada, instead of taking the normal route on his morning walk, he took the Chatika road, and he drove around that area. And there were a car also filled with sannyasis who followed him, but he didn't speak very much during that walk. And so, and also Harisuri Prabhu mentions that the park was very poorly maintained. But in the class, Prabhupada spoke from the Srimad Bhagavatam, which he spoke quite often from the 7th canto, chapter 9, text 46 of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Wherein Prahlad Maharaj speaks about Maunam, or the vow of silence. Even in India today, many people practice this. silence, monam vrat. Although it's generally not done for spiritual purposes. To some degree it is, I would say. But really, it's really not observed very strictly, in the sense that the practitioner who follows this, the person who follows this type of practice, still communicates by writing in a blackboard or chalk. I want this, give me water. Or a pencil and a paper. You'll say, okay, give me the garland, or something like that. So therefore Prabhupada raised the point that there's no question of not talking. Because people will talk, one must talk. So what they should talk about is only about Krishna. If not, we will talk all mundane matter activities, about mundane activities. If that's the case, that we're going to speak about mundane activities, then we should follow that monam vrat. Then we should follow, because you find, devotees engage in mundane talk. From time to time, I walk around a lot. Practically the whole day I'm walking. I can overhear people talking so many mundane things. But as far as preaching Krishna consciousness, there is never enough time, isn't it? Just like Rupa Goswami says, I've only got one tongue and 2 ears. He was desiring millions of years and trillions of tongues. Because then he would feel jubilant that he'll feel sense of bliss that he is glorifying Krishna. So why is he expecting so many ears and so many mouths? For the glorification of Krishna. So this silence so far, then Prabhupada, the touch of the, he is of irony. He commented on the present state of affairs of the conditioned soul. And what do you think he spoke about? Even 16 rounds become very, very difficult for us. You know why? Because we conditioned to talking nonsense. So it's like that, chanting Hare Krishna 16 rounds. We should chant. It takes 2 hours, and 2 hours out of 24 hours, it's not bad that we could chant Hare Krishna. If a person cannot chant Hare Krishna, then he should stop talking. That's okay. This is like monam. You better remain silent. And this is a recommendation from Prahlad Maharaj. What do you think of that? Silence. And Prabhupada concluded that, he concluded the lecture by saying that nowadays not many people can follow strict practices mentioned in the scriptures. It's very difficult to follow the practices. So how do we really follow the practices? Like every time I observe so many things, and when we walk around here, especially in the temple room, and we observe. But sometimes it's not our duty to correct also, because the person may not be, we may not have a good relationship with the person may get upset, and the person may have other ideas, and I've had so many experiences like that, so therefore I remain silent. Yeah. So therefore we should rely on the mercy of the Lord. Prabhupada concluded, and we should chant Hare Krishna. Now chanting 16 rounds is crucial and essential or important. And one of Prabhupada's disciple, Umapati, this is not mentioned, certain things I'm mentioning is not mentioned in the diary, but I'm just adding to it. So Umapati, one of Prabhupada's disciple, Umapati Prabhu, said that, Prabhupada said that we all should chant 64 rounds. And the devotees were shocked that they had to chant 64 rounds a day. And they said they couldn't. And Prabhupada said, all right, 32 rounds. 32 rounds was also a lot. And Prabhupada said, all right, 16 rounds and no less. That's how we started chanting 16 rounds. But ultimately, if we have time, we should chant as much as possible. The Acharya has set the standard, Prabhupada has set the standard for 16 rounds. But sometimes, Acharyas in different lines will set different standards. But we still follow the standard set by Srila Prabhupada. Because, people in the Gaudiya Math or in other organizations chant 4 rounds sometimes, or 8 rounds, or whatever they allocated. And they can still also go back to Godhead by following that process. Because the Acharya has laid it down. It's there in the Bhagavatam that the Acharya has that power of attorney to do that, or that authority to do that. So therefore we have to be cautious that, chanting 16 rounds for us is essential. We can't follow another standard because the Acharya standard has to be followed. And, whilst Shruti Kirti was once massaging Srila Prabhupada, and, as usual, we'll go and complain. So one senior devotee came, feeling very concerned. He said, Srila Prabhupada, the leader here is not chanting his 16 rounds. How can we follow such a person? And Prabhupada said, on the battlefield, Arjuna was not chanting his rounds. Arjuna was not chanting his rounds. And, there was a great war. And Arjuna was busy doing his service. He didn't have the time to chant his rounds. So the leader here, he was explaining when Prabhupada, the leader here may not be fighting such a battle, but we should see that such a devotee is doing so much service that perhaps he doesn't have the time to chant his rounds. So we have to be cautious, that, Prabhupada said this, for good reasons. At least we shouldn't just come unnecessarily complain. Rather we should help the devotee to take on some service and let him chant his rounds. That should be more what we should be doing. And because Srila Prabhupada really wanted us to follow the process, and he wanted us to cooperate. And sometimes, I hear so much about cooperation all the time. But then we really don't see that cooperation. And sometimes you may think, well, the person said such and such a thing, then I don't want to cooperate with him. But that's the person you should cooperate with. Because you should help him. You should engage in. So in that means you are cooperating. Just thinking about this morning that we should cooperate. But, we should also have that mood, to cooperate with others. And if the people don't have the mood to cooperate with us, we should still cooperate with them. How does that sound? Make sense? Although it may be difficult. And Srila Prabhupada's system was, if you're having some challenges, you go to the temple president, then you go to the GBC man. So in that way, he wanted us to cooperate and work together. But you don't take this example now and do a lot of service and don't chant 16 rounds. Don't do that. We shouldn't do that. So he gave, different understanding depending on the circumstances. Because each one is an individual. Sometimes the devotees were managing big temples, they were doing lots of service, and it was difficult. But then again, if a devotee was not managing a temple, he was not doing such important service, all service is important. In any case, all service to Krishna. Yeah. Then, there was one devotee. People engage in business also, which is not good at times because you can become very diplomatic in business. When one runs business, it's like a diplomatic behavior sets in, because that's the duty of a Vaishya. It's not the duty of a Brahman, not a function of a Brahman. Then Prabhupada said, what is the use if he's not chanting? What is the use of management if he's not chanting his 16 rounds? So we have to chant our 16 round. Prabhupada once was in New Dwarka and he was, after chanting his 16 rounds, he pulled his counter and he said, now I can do any damn thing I want. So chanting 16 rounds is very important. And therefore, I thought I spoke a little bit about it. Mentioning like Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's time, there were different standards also. Some chanted 4 rounds, some chanted 64 rounds, some chanted many, many rounds, depending on their engagement. In service. But Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur instructed everybody to chant 64 rounds. So one of his disciples commented, somebody approached him and said, how is it that we saw such and such a person is chanting 64 rounds? So he took it, and Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur responded, you don't see, I see. Because he was seeing that all the service that the person was doing was considered to be that chanting of 64 rounds. That's the way he looked at it. Okay. So coming back to the point of silence. And when I was reading, I had a very tiring day yesterday. But when I was reading, on silence, there's a very nice verse from the Srimad Bhagavatam on the 4th canto, and I'll read the verse. The sage Kadamba accepted silence as a vow in order to think of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and take shelter of Him exclusively. Without association, he traveled over the surface of the globe as a sannyasi, devoid of any relationship with fire or shelter. So here Prabhupada comments, here we find Sri Raghunath ki, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ki, Srila Prabhupada ki. Where Prabhupada says, unless we become silent, you cannot think about the pastimes or the activities of the Lord. Meaning that you have to become very peaceful and control. Your senses has to be controlled. Because, you find, you find different types of people, and I'm sure you all have come across, whether in spiritual circles and out in the material world, in your encounters with other people. People just love talking, and they could just be offensive and tell so many different things. But we have to be careful, because once we say something, we cannot retract it. Because it's already, the Brahmastra has already entered the heart. Brahmastra is a form of mantra that you can, if your opponent, if you just want it, even if there's a group of people, you just target it at your opponent, it attacks that opponent. But there's a potency also, as it's going, you can withdraw it. But for us, we don't have that power. I don't know, maybe some of people do, but in general, people don't have that power, and they offend people. So we have to be very, very careful about that. So we have to become like peaceful. Sometimes people are fools and they cannot speak nicely, and for them, then like that monum is okay. And then they take vows of monum vrat, because you don't know what they're thinking of. You can think he's a great sadhu. You can think, well, he's not a good sadhu. But rather one should become silent so that people will not disturb them. That's good. And Chanakya Pandit said, that a rascal appears very intelligent as long as he does not speak. Yeah. But speaking is the test. Speaking is the test. But you also have people who are impersonalists. They're silent also. That's a different level. But we should become silent, especially when there's some nonsensical talks going on. Just like, Maharaj Ambarish was a very good example of when he spoke. So whenever he spoke about the pastimes of the Lord. So yeah, because, when you remain silent, it has an effect on the other person. I had that opportunity. I had that once. There was like a meeting that I was called for once, many decades ago. But anyway, there was a meeting, and I could sense that all the other two members were already discussed everything, so there was no need for me to discuss anything. So I remained silent. But it created a bad energy in the room also. Because then the person realized, this person is just quiet, he's not saying anything. Then I had to tell him, I had to speak and tell him, because you have discussed everything. So, there's no need to discuss any further. But he got agitated, So this is, there's so many things you can learn from the Shastra, from the scriptures. So much you can learn. Like even Lord Chaitanya was hearing. You remember? It was for many days. From whom? Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. But he remained silent. Then it kind of like gave him some realization. And the response was that he could understand the original, but what his interpretation of it, he couldn't really understand. So that also, one has to know how to use silence and when to use it. I'll give you another example. Srila Prabhupada once was, in Bombay with some people. He was probably in his walk or whatever. And there was Vishaka and other devotees. And then some beggars came then. Prabhupada gave some money to the beggars. And Vishaka immediately said, Prabhupada, that's Krishna's money. How could you give Krishna's money? And Prabhupada remained silent. He didn't say anything. And as she was going in the car, then she realized that she must have offended the spiritual master. But at the same time, then she got this realization that maybe Prabhupada was giving this as prasadam. And Prabhupada said yes. So silence is necessary at times, and yeah. If we're not talking about Krishna, then it's good to be silent. It's okay. So then now Prabhupada goes on his mid-morning walk to inspect some land at the Krishna Balaram Hasanam Goshala in Mathura Road, because the property was for sale and Prabhupada was thinking of purchasing it to use as a Goshala. Then he took another devotee, Akshananda Swami Bhagatji, and one or two other devotees. A few devotees went. So on the return, he was discussing with Bhagatji, about the land. But Bhagatji was not in favor, he was not in favor of Prabhupada buying the land. And he told Prabhupada the land is full of stones. Srila Prabhupada asked him how he knew that. And he laughed and he pointed to Prabhupada's books. He said, you know this, you know the books, you know the verses in the books. Similarly, I'm a farmer's son. And I know that within the earth, there is stones. Quite interesting, huh? And then Prabhupada laughed and he decided not to buy the land. It's quite interesting because there's so much you can learn from this, That somebody may have, some, maybe knowledgeable in a particular field, may not be knowledgeable in everything. So he may take knowledge from, other people who have expertise on that particular field. And as a devotee, we must be also conscious of that we should also do that. When somebody is good at something and you can learn from them, then learn from them. Is it okay? Make sense? So then Guru Das was taking the devotees on parikram, Vrindavan, because the pastime places, the histories like that. Then we come to now April 2nd, 1976. Prabhupada yet now visits one of his godbrothers, Math, on the road to Mathura. But he found the gates were locked. As usual, when you go to temples, gates are locked. And there was no sign of any life within, there's like nobody. Like sometime when you go to on the Radhakund, where Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur's shoes is there was nobody there when we went there. So I know where the key was kept. I took the key, I opened the door and I went inside. And when I went inside, there were a few devotees with us, and then we started showing them all the things. This is Bhakti Vinod Thakur was here, Bhakti Siddhanta shoes is here. So I'm looking for the shoes, but the shoes is now in a box, in a donation box. So we picked up the donation box and we're placing it on everybody's head. There's a photograph, we put the shoes in everybody's head. And we left. But anyway, this is what happens, and sometimes there's nobody. But after loitering some minutes, somebody came and then they were able to get darshan of the deity. And Prabhupada said, since it is so difficult to comprehend spiritual topics in this age, he stressed that as neophyte devotees, we must be actively engaged in Krishna conscious activities. And then the discussion goes on to one person, Sharma Das. I'll just read that. Recalling his recent meetings with Sharma Das in Mayapur, he told us that to imitate Haridas Thakur by trying to chant in a secluded place is simply cheating. So because sometimes people would chant in secluded places within, the hope that the people say, well, hey, look at him, he's chanting, very advanced, not talking to anybody. Nobody is around him. In seclusion. But we should be actively engaged in devotional service, as Prabhupada said. We should distribute books. It's very important for us to also do that. Because when we're giving Krishna's books, what are we giving? What are we giving them? What are we giving? Knowledge, right? Yeah. So like that, we should be engaged in an active service, and we should be doing some practical things, like putting the table, setting Tulsi Devi, all these practical things. It may sound very menial, taking the lamp, all these things, but it's devotional service to Krishna. So we must do that. So now we come to a point is where Yashodanandan Swami is back in South India, and he related an interesting story about Prahlad Maharaj and the deity of Vara Narasimha that he saw in Simachalam, a place about 250 miles south of Jagannath Puri. And the story is narrated in the Vishnu Purana. So I'll just read it. It's just a small couple of lines. The story of the temple is related in the Vishnu Puran. Briefly, it is as follows. After Hiranyakashipu accepted many times to kill his son, he finally devised a very sinister plan. He sent his servant to throw Prahlad off a hill into the ocean and instructed them to throw a hill on top of him so he would die. The servants carried Prahlad on top of Simhagiri and threw him into the ocean. As soon as they were ready to throw the hill over the devotee, Prahlad Maharaj, Nrsimhadev came and rescued Prahlad out of the ocean. Prahlad, out of his devotion for his Lord, requested the Lord to kindly manifest himself on top of Simhagiri, the hill where Nrsimha served Prahlad, and asked him to please show himself in the form of Vara. He also requested to show him the form in which he would later kill Hiranyakashipu. So the Lord manifested himself as Vara Nrsimha, and Prahlad worshipped that deity there on top of the hill. It's fabulous. It's unique. Nice, huh? It's very wonderful. Yeah. So now we move on to April 3rd, 1976. Anybody have any comments so far? April 3rd, 1976. So, Guru Das Maharaj, he found a nice garden where Prabhupada could take his walk. Few people went to him, some sannyasis, and he seems to be enjoying, the outings and going out. But on the whole, Harisuri Prabhu says that Prabhupada was very relaxed in Vrindavan and he was at home. So we come to the point of the deities now, the discussion on deity worship. And, each morning, Srila Prabhupada, he would go and greet the deities. And if you watch the way he does it, with very great devotion, you notice? He offers his obeisances when he takes darshan. He listens to the Govindam prayers. And he was always on time. Curtain opens and he looked very intently on the deities. Then he gets down. First he looks them for a few seconds. Then he gets down and prostrates and offers his obeisances. It's not, people say, they shout, Shri Raghunath ki jai, and then they just go down. It's not like that. This is a whole focus. You have to look at the deities, see them, and then offer your obeisances, and you'll have more appreciation also. Yeah. And then, he goes from each altar, from Gaurnitai to Krishna Balram, and then Radhasham, and finally to Radhasham Sundar. And then he would sip the Charanamrita, and then, he would turn around and like that. And then it comes to the point that, again he discusses, the verse on Prahlad Maharaj. Somehow this topic always come about on Prahlad, Hare Krishna. on Prahlad Maharaj. And this, I'll just read this paragraph. In today's Srimad Bhagavatam verse, Prahlad Maharaj explained that Krishna is everything. The air, fire, sky, earth, water, everything. Subtle or gross, including the mind, consciousness, and false ego, as well as whatever is expressed by the words or the mind. And then Prabhupada goes on to explain how, to worship the deities in the mood of devotion. Sometimes we may be very close to the deity and we may be doing the arti, but we may be very far away also. But a person who's very far away, maybe even standing right in the back of the temple, but is very close to the deity. It's also there. So remember that, yeah. Then Prabhupada was recalling, there's a man in Delhi. He kind of asked, which is a question that normally we all probably, have come across. People have asked us and told us, and God is everywhere. So what is the use of going to the temple? You're running to the temple, but God is everywhere. So Prabhupada, what he did, he reversed the logic. If God is everywhere, why not in the temple? Yeah, so he's also there. So it's very interesting, and look at this connection. And then he started speaking about the electricity. Like electrical energy is everywhere. But the wiring and switch enables us to utilize it. Isn't it? We know now, if it's here, then why don't we just put the light off here? The energy is everywhere. We have to go to the switch to put it off. So similarly, he said, Krishna is everywhere, and you can worship Krishna from anything. And just like Krishna knows, everyone knows that the deity is made of stone, right? It's made of marble. And then you also have marble on the floor. Just like in the Krishna Balaram temple, the marble is black and white. And the deity may also be black and white. Everyone knows that it's the same marble. But the question is, but why you see the black and white deity in the temple, and then you go and you offer prayers to it? You get it? But you're not doing that for the tile. That's quite interesting. It is the same. That means you are seeing it from a different position. Isn't it? It's different. So that is love of Krishna. That is love of Krishna. So those who have got that love, they are seeing that same stone on the floor and the same stone in the deity. The devotee sees both, because he knows that's also Krishna's energy. That's Krishna's energy. So then you get foolish men who are worshipping. They say that I can worship this stone also. I can worship that tile. Isn't it? So Prabhupada, he brings about the philosophy of achintya abhed tattva. Simultaneously one and different. That makes sense, right? So Krishna, yes, the stone on the floor, that I am. But I am not present there. This is called achintya abhed tattva. Now a lot of people think that, when Krishna spreads himself everywhere, then he is lost. So he has no more form. And that's a material calculation. And Prabhupada gave the example of a big piece of paper, and you make it into bits of pieces of paper, and then you throw it in the air. So the big sheet is no longer existing, it's finished. Isn't it? So this calculation is like that. That if Krishna is all pervasive, then where is his form? His form is finished. But that's nonsense, And that's how Prabhupada responds. And then he speaks about, this is like technical information, but we won't get into it. He's talking about the 9th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. That he's spread everywhere, he's all pervasive. He's spread everywhere, his energies are everywhere. But in my person, I'm not there. But a devotee should understand, as we were explaining earlier on, that Krishna is on the throne and Krishna is on the floor. Both places. He's there on the throne and he's also on the floor. Because that's Krishna's energy. And that way you can also develop love for Krishna. In that you're seeing all this belongs to Krishna, you're remembering Krishna. And that is one of the processes of devotional service. And then you can also come closer to Krishna. Therefore we should be careful to clean the floor. We should clean the floor. Like sometimes we have, things lying there, like mats and things like that. It may look not very nice, may look a little untidy, so we should take it up, put it in one corner. Do like that. And because you cannot neglect anything in Krishna's service. It's not that cleaning the temple room is different from cleaning the yard. It's the same thing. It's Krishna's property. And every morning we sing about the deity. Shri Vigrahadan Nana Nityanana Singaratan Mandira Marjanado Yuktasya Bhaktam Shanayanjatopi Vande Gurosi Charanara Vrinda. Because the spiritual master is always engaged in the worship of Shri Radha and Krishna. And then he engages in disciple in such worship. They dress the deities very beautifully. They put nice ornaments, lovely clothing. Looks very attractive. And we sing it every morning. But we may not know it. That means that. So you cannot say, Krishna is sitting there in the throne, then I can neglect the floor. That is foolishness. See? Just like in Vrindavan, they clean the temple, in the mornings. Really wash everything up in the morning. And practically all of India in our temples, we do that. So you should, just as much as you take care of the deity, you should take care of the surroundings and the environment. So this is Krishna consciousness. Just to, like we're giving the example, like what Dayasindhu is doing is not inferior. He's working in the garden there in comparison to the person worshipping the deity. He's serving Krishna. So we shouldn't see it like that. I'm on the altar, I'm a big time pujari, and it doesn't work like that. So we should respect other people's services. There's so much to say. Just like, sometimes when you go to Vrindavan, you find people, running to take the dust of Vrindavan and put it on their head. But it's just another energy of the Lord. We taking the sand and we're putting it on the head. And that's the proper mood of a devotee, Because if we remember that Krishna is in every atom, then our Krishna consciousness becomes very, very strong, more firmly established. Because that verse in the Brahma Samhita, Andantara Paramanu Chayantarastam. I'm in every atom. He's also in the sky, everywhere, Krishna. Of course, seeing the deity as Krishna is also important for us. At least theoretically we should understand that. But as we advance more and more in Krishna consciousness, then we know that's Krishna. So, in Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's time, I just want to tell you two things and I will conclude because we don't have much time to go any further. I'll just, and we can take some questions. It's already nearing, I got 2 minutes. So one, I was reading last night in Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's biography about deity worship. And the pujari once forgot to put the mosquito nets. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he never checked at any time, whether this was done. He really was not concerned about checking because, he knew the pujaris would take care. So next morning in the Mangal Arati, he asked the pujari if he had forgotten to set the nets on the deities because there's a lot of mosquitoes. And the pujari admitted yes, that he forgot. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said that the deities did not sleep last night. Because that's how he figured it out. Not because, he was like checking. Because he could see, he could understand that the deities were tired. I mean, Krishna and Radha, were tired. They haven't rested. And he responded, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said, you fix the net for yourself, but not for Krishna. Why? And in the morning lecture, he stressed the seriousness of the service of the deity form of the Lord. And he said that, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur attributed any problematic events in any math or in the temples due to offenses of deity worship. Like whenever there were occurrences of like theft, severe illnesses of himself, or other Madhvasis or other devotees, he attributed that, he warned that his disciple not to do that, not to engage in, offenses to the deity. So people will get sick. And you'll have these challenges. So we have to be very, very careful. Before I used to come and put the lights off in the temple, and a couple of times it was late. I would come and put the lights off a bit late and close the temple, and I noticed that the light was on in the temple in the deity room. So I went to Srila Swarup and I told him, and he immediately came, to put it off. So we have to be, it's not that, technically they are not asleep, and like that. So we'll stop here. Any questions or comments? I just took 1 minute extra because the deity worship was 10 minutes late, I think. It was later. Hare Krishna. Any comments or questions? Anybody has any realizations or like to share or anything? I'm just going from one side. Okay, we'll conclude. Srila Prabhupada ki. Hare Krishna.